Hola, mi amigos! This is a story about how I wrote my first book. This is probably the hardest cognitive challenge I've ever had to do. It tore at my discipline. Resistance killed me along the way. And today I just wanted to tell you the story about how this came to be. 2.5 years ago, we're in the middle of COVID, sitting in my apartment in San Diego with my best mate. And I'd had enough. So what we did is we packed up, we went to Walmart, grabbed a tent, went to our dealer, grabbed a bunch of mushrooms and a lot of weed, and drove east. And we went into the wild. All we wanted to do was experience life at its purest form in a primal way, light fires, pitch our tent, go into the wild, and what happened was far more than we could have ever expected. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm Ben Webby, and today I just wanted to talk to you guys about how I wrote my first book and my 2-year process from taking it from a bunch of journals into a finally printed out book. Now, I know this isn't an actual book, but this is the last printout of it. Now, this is for any aspiring writers or novelists who feel like they have a story inside them but don't really know the process to getting it out, and how they can go step by step to going from a life experience or an idea into a finished novel. A couple months before we set out on our adventure, I listened to a podcast by Brian Koppelman and Julia Cameron, and she talked about morning pages and how it was the key to unlocking her creativity, and it was a ritual that she did every morning. I'd tried it sporadically, but I knew that with this road trip I wanted to make it a routine, and the best way for me to do that was just to write about what was happening. So I had this idea that I could just sit down every morning in my camp chair and write 3 pages unfiltered of everything that had happened on our journey. And as we went along, I decided that I wanted to turn this into a bit of a travel diary, just something for me to remember when I grew old, or something for me and my friends to look back on and remember the crazy times that had happened. It was vital for me to be able to document my journey, and without even realizing that I wanted to turn it into a novel, I was able to get pages on pages of content about what had happened throughout our journey. And this allowed me to just write down anything that I was feeling or experiencing or anything that had happened to us. And to be honest, I thought that I would only share it with my friend who we were traveling with. That was until things started to get a little bit crazy on the road trip. So as the adventure progressed, I realized that there might actually be a story inside of here. So many wild things were happening to us, from bear encounters in Colorado to going mustering with real-life cowboys in Wyoming, to getting caught in a snowstorm, running from cops and starting campfires in illegal places, and of course ego deaths from too many psilocybin trips. But basically, to start with, all I had to do was sit in my camp chair in front of the fire with my coffee every morning as the sun was coming up and just write 3 pages unfiltered. And these were the key to doing so. So if you're looking to start a novel, I guess the first step would be go out and live some experiences that you think you want to share with people. And secondly, document it along the way. A travel diary is a perfect way to do that. So that is stage 1. Once the adventure had come to a close, so this is 2 months after we set out, it was time to type up what I had written. Now, this was a much longer process than I thought it would be. It ended up being around 70,000 words, and a lot of it was shit. I got to the end of it and I actually hated it. Reading through it, it didn't feel like a story. Like I'd read so many different novels, and this wasn't a novel. All it was this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. And it was quite disheartening. Resistance kicked in massively. It's like, you're not going to be a storyteller. You're not a writer. You don't know how to write this. And I put it on the shelf for a while. I had it in the back of my mind and I always wanted to do it, but for a couple months it just sat there. Eventually I came back to it. It was eating at me and I wanted to get done, and I'd promised my friends that I would write it. And to me, I just had to bring this creative thing out. It was the only thing that gave me the deepest satisfaction, and it just had to be done. I'm sure many creatives feel that there's this calling inside of them, and I'd never really had that before. And having it sitting in my drive, just waiting, nothing happening to it, I knew that I had to upskill in my writing department and learn how to actually tell a story. So I printed it off and I just went through and I culled everything that I hated, everything that didn't fit into the story arc. And then I pulled out a highlight or 2 highlights from each day that I felt like there could be a story there. And this is kind of like you're laying out a 1,000-piece puzzle and you don't even know what the end piece looks like. You don't have the photo as an example of what you're trying to do in the end. All you have is these scattered pieces that you have to somehow fit together into a final picture. And whether that picture makes sense or not, who knows? At the same time, I decided to take a course on how to actually write a book. If I was going to do this thing any justice and try and make it replicate any of the feelings that I had on the trip or any of the adventures that we actually took and put it into paper, I had to learn how to tell a story. So I took a course on how to actually structure a novel. And this course was based on Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which talks about the beats of every novel or every good movie. This helped me to plan out the beats of the novel, and it kind of gave me a guideline for that puzzle. So basically, I got an A3 pad and I wrote down every beat. What is the main thing that's going to happen here? What are the hero and the characters feeling? What are we sensing? And what changes are occurring? So that there's an actual character journey that the reader could follow along with. And this was revolutionary for my writing. It actually gave me something to aim at. It's like, okay, now I can see the roller coaster that I'm going to try and take the reader on. Another thing that was extremely pivotal for the writing process was reading Fear and Loathing by Hunter-S-Thompson. I'd never read a book like this. It blew my mind. It changed my idea entirely on how you could actually write. And then I dove deep onto gonzo journalism, which is what he created. I didn't know that you were allowed to write so freely, almost without rules, about true events. There was a lot of drugs in this book, and I didn't know how to bring it in and make it sort of a PC traveling book. And I realized it doesn't have to be. It turned into this mind-boggling wild adventure of expanding your mind and getting out of the rut that you're into and not letting the walls literally close in on your head. After that, I was ready to do my second draft. Now, this is where the bulk of the work came in. I realized that there wasn't really a story until I had this. It was all just facts laid out. So I started again. I used what I had in my first draft. I used the beats, and I also started to steal from good books. So Austin Kleon has a great book called Steal Like an Artist. And basically, all artists steal. Whether they intentionally do it or not, our art that we create is based on something else that has happened, and it's your unique way of combining these, adding your personal touch, your creativity, and your experiences into making something entirely new. If you think about a DJ or even a rapper, they remix songs all the time, and it still comes out as their own. Now, some of the books that were vital for me to learn how to tell a story were obviously Fear and Loathing, and Zorba the Greek, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and also a little bit of homebrew music, a New Zealand band. And once I started combining all these together, the story actually started to come through. So this actually took me probably about 8 months. I went and locked myself in a writer's cabin and got away from all distractions and just forced myself to write it. It was probably the most challenging cognitive task I've ever done. This thing just sort of sitting on my shoulders or sitting inside of me 2.5 years, it just had to come out. And I ended up reading Deep Work by Cal Newport, and this blew my mind. Basically, I realized that I needed a disciplined structure to be able to write. Like, I thought I was disciplined with writing, but I wasn't. And that was a wake-up call. And so basically, I started to plan my routine around this writing. It gave me so much joy to wake up early in the morning, just write when I don't have to answer to anyone else's agenda, and I haven't even checked my phone or seen what's going on in the world. All I have to do is get up, write, or edit. And this was vital in bringing me to the finishing point of the novel. At that time, I was also reading Onwriting by Stephen King. So I think any author who wants to write a book needs to write this. I don't personally read or enjoy Stephen King's books or the movies that have been made, but the man knows how to write, and he knows how to teach others to write as well. So if you're a struggling writer, read Onwriting. It will teach you how to rip out every adverb, how to stop all the cliched similes, and how to actually tell a story. And finally, it got me to finishing my final draft. So that is what I have here in my hands. And what he tells you to do is basically print it off with double spacing, big margins, and go through and look at every single word. So basically, you'll see all of my edits on each of these pages. I went through this with a fine-tooth comb. And Stephen King talks about it like doing an archaeological dig. If you're an archaeologist and you're out looking for a skeleton, say you stumble across a bone, you don't know what's underneath all of that dirt. That's how you feel when you're writing a story. You have to look at that bone and try and imagine what it's going to look like as you chip away at it. You chip away all the excess, all the fluff you don't need, you chip away, and eventually you've got a bit more of a frame, and you start to see how the story takes shape. So I went through all 370 single-spaced pages. These are all my notes on every chapter. And I was on a bit of a roll there, so that was exciting for me. I took about 2 weeks to do that. It was my first full read through. Side note on that, you also have to take a 2-month break after finishing it and then printing it out. You're not allowed to look at it, so that when you come back to it, you're looking at it with fresh eyes. And this was crazy to me. So basically, I've been attached to this book for 2 years, and Stephen King says in Onwriting to put it away for 2 months, work on something else so that you can come back at it with fresh eyes and be willing to kill your darlings. Basically, my code for this was good section, I highlighted it green, shit or kill, it was orange. If I wanted to improve any word choice or sentence structure or grammar, I highlighted it pink. And if I wanted to add more or go further in depth into a situation or more character development or more backstory, I just highlighted it blue. And so this meant when I was finally ready to sit down and do my final polish, I had my code here and I had a book that I just had to go page by page through, looking at it like this. So this is what the first page looked like, and basically the next 370 pages also looked like that. And that was hard because you've printed it off and it's like, oh, it's done, you know, I've finished a book. But It's not done. And the polish is what makes the book, in my opinion. It transforms it from something stagnant to an actual moving, dynamic story that actually makes you feel and relates more directly to the real adventure that I went on. And so that brings us to here. And basically now I've shared it with 5 of my closest friends, and I've got all of them to give me feedback, and I want to know what's missing in the story. What parts do you love? Tim Ferriss talks about this. He sends it to people that he trusts. Basically, you want them to pick out the 10% that they love the most that you would keep in the book no matter what, pick out the 10% that they hated and dump it, and get any feedback on how it's written, because once you've been staring at a book so long, you get so attached to it, or it just makes so much sense to you, or you just get sick of looking at it and you don't want to do any more edits. So it's time for me to get outside feedback on it. And so I'm in that process at the moment. I downloaded it as an EPUB and a Mobi, and I've got it on my own Kindle, and my friends also do. And once that's done, I have to do one more proof, send it off to the editors, and try and get this thing published. So to sum it all up, basically, first step is to go out and live an experience. Go out and do something crazy that you want to write down and remember forever. Secondly, carry a journal with you the whole time. Talk about what's going on, write it down every day, and morning pages is the easiest way to break through that. I did these every day, even while I was writing it, just to get the creative juices flowing. And you don't have writer's block when you don't have any pressure, but you just have to write 3 pages. And then next step would be to print off your first draft. Just print it off, rip through it, and try and pick out the best highlights. Try and pick out how the story sort of flows. What are the arcs to it? Write down the beat sheet, rewrite it, rewrite the whole thing as if you're starting from scratch. Go through your draft 2, and once you've done that, print it off, single space, go through that with a fine-tooth comb, and then type up your changes, send it off to someone to get feedback on. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I hope it inspires you to write your first novel. I was such an amateur writer when I started this. I still am an amateur writer, and I know that I want to develop it. That was the only thing. I had a love for writing. So if you've got a love for writing and you want to tell stories, it's a hell of a ride. It will beat you up, it will make you think you're shit, but the joy of writing something and committing to something after 2.5 years and actually finishing it, there's no better feeling really that I've experienced. It is a deep satisfaction knowing that I can actually bring a creative work out into the world. And if you want to follow along with how I go about trying to get this book published and my process for doing that, and then my marketing campaign for how I want to get the book out into the world, hit the subscribe button, and I'll be sharing more content about how I bring this idea that I had in my journals into a published novel that one day gets into bookstores and maybe on the bestsellers list. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.